Hello, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. This week, we were talking to Colin D Ellis about how managers can contribute to great workplace culture. When people are often promoted to manager, they aren't often given a sort of handbook on how to become a really great manager. But this is the perfect conversation for those people. If you're thinking about becoming a manager, or you're thinking about assigning someone to becoming a manager, listen to this and have a magical week. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. As you'll be able to tell from the title of this episode,
like a podcast pretty much every week.
Yeah, exactly. So this week it's the Magical Learning Podcast. Every week it's the Magical Learning Podcast, but so it's good to have that. As you can tell, we have a guest today, which is very exciting. We love having guests on. But before we get to them, let's check in with the regular team and see how they're going. So I might start with you, Al. Al, how are you going today?
I'm going great, Jez. Yeah, we had a 18th birthday party at our house on the weekend, which was lots of fun, and the group of teenage girls behaved themselves very well, which Renee and I were quite relieved about.
Great work, Al. You survived another exciting event.
We did.
And Graham, how are you going this week?
I'm good, Jess. Thanks. Again, my internet connection's a bit dodgy, so if I freeze or my audio's a bit choppy at times, I do apologise. But I'm at home just watching guinea fowl terrify themselves and flap all over the place. So, it's a fun thing to do on a Friday afternoon.
That's amazing. Good to hear. We always like getting the updates on the guinea fowl there. And Colin,
living the dream.
That's exactly right. Colin, how's your week been?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm wondering whether guinea fowl is a metaphor for something or I'm really missing a trick. I've never, ever seen a guinea fowl terrify itself, and I'm wondering what that entails. Also slightly disappointed that we're not talking about foxes, but maybe we'll do that later on. I'm great. Thank you, Jez. We had a public holiday at the start of the week, and I actually took the day off. And by taking the day off, I mean I spent the day cleaning. So, it was nice to get back into work, which it always is.
That's a good way to spend the day off there, Colin. Just, making sure you're still working on something at least. Good for you. I've had a good week this week as well. I'm taking a friend to do stand-up for the first time this week. I do a bit of stand-up comedy. So this weekend I'm going to show someone the ropes, which is pretty exciting. So fingers crossed they get into it. And we've got a late breaking John Scotland. John, how's your week going?
Disappointed that this.
How are we all?
Good. We're just doing introductions. So how's your week going?
It's been flat out this week. It's not good for me. I've had to actually work for a living. That's very overrated.
Have you been cleaning as well, John?
Sorry, what was that?
Have you been cleaning as well?
No. That'll happen starting tomorrow. Got to be clean.
I'm a little disappointed that. Sorry.
Why should I be cleaning?
I have no idea.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's jump in today. So, everyone's had a good week. It seems like cleaning is a theme now, which is exciting. So thanks for that one, Colin. It's also inspired me that I also need to clean this weekend. So thanks for that. So now, Colin, people may be being introduced to you for the first time here. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I've been working for myself for almost 10 years now, Jez, and I help organizations around the world to create vibrant workplace cultures. A little potted history. I was a permanent employee for 30 years. I'm originally from Liverpool in the UK. I'm desperately clinging onto my accent there. And was an employee in the private sector in the UK in media and retail, and emigrated to New Zealand in 2007 and became a manager in the public service, which I enjoyed for the most part. And have I always say the base is Melbourne now. That's where the kids are at school, but I do a fair bit of traveling about the place, helping different people in different cities.
Amazing. Well, as another Melburnian, exciting to be at least sort of in a proximity to you. Very exciting. Now, today we're going to be talking about how managers can contribute to great workplace culture, which I think is a great topic because I don't think we've really fully touched on managers as a topic in general. So this is a great jumping off point for us. So Colin, tell us a little bit about how you came up with this topic.
It's just not something we do, Jez. We don't teach managers how to build culture. The expectation of senior leaders is that, you know, almost every senior leader I speak to is like, oh, we want a high performing culture, we want a high performing culture. And I'm like, okay, great. You know, well, how are you teaching your managers how to do it? The expectation is they just know that they get to a position in the hierarchy and that they know how to do this thing called culture, and they don't. So I just felt that it was a topic worth exploring in the 30 minutes that we've got, Jess.
Amazing. Well, I think a great place to start is actually Kanika's question. So I might start there, just before we even get into the full culture element, which is, to anybody thinking of becoming a manager, what are some things they should consider before taking that step?
The first thing is do you like people? which sounds ridiculous. But I think that, you know, most people get to managerial positions because it's their turn, length of tenure. They, you know, they're at the top of their band and they, you know, they can't get any further without getting more money. I always say to people, you know, people say, oh, my goal is to be a manager. And I'm like, do you like working with people? Because you have to become a coach, you have to become a mentor, you have to become an emotional sponge. You have to trust people. You have to inspire and motivate them almost daily sometimes. And so I really question, you know, when people want to become a manager, I'm like, listen, and some people are perfect management material. Some people want to stretch themselves. Some people want to grow. And I think that's great. But ultimately, management is about inspiring and motivating, you know, individuals to do great work. It's also about building an environment in which they can bring their best selves to work. And, you know, all of the pay rises in the world kind of won't compensate for the fact that being a manager is emotionally exhausting. Forget even being a leader. Leadership is a whole other thing. Leadership is a choice to make a positive difference to the lives of humans. Management really is about making sure people get up in the morning, bring the right attitude to work, do the job so you can achieve the results within an environment that has a sense of belonging, commitment, and collaboration. So it's pretty full on management. And yet for those that do it well, not only do they leave a legacy that will mean that they're remembered almost forever, but they'll get a sense of personal fulfillment and they'll light a fire inside themselves that they'll find hard to put out.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, Colin. And I think that it's so true. You know, it's not for everybody. And, you know, in a lot of positions, it's a natural next step. But you're so right. You got to look at it from a much broader perspective. I might go to John. John, what was your question and why'd you pick it?
So, hey, Colin, lovely to meet you, or virtually meet you. So, I guess just feeding on from what Kanika said, I mean, new managers come in and they want to make a difference, or they think they need to make a difference. And it's, as you said, it's not for everyone. But how do they kickstart that positive culture for their team, or you know, whether it's being a new manager or a new team, how do they kickstart the culture?
I think that the first thing that you would do, John, is build relationships between individuals. I think, you know, as a new manager myself, many times, the first thing that I did was actually spend some time listening. I think it's not about a new manager impressing upon someone or how great I am. This is what I intend to do. Sit down, listen, take the time to build relationships. As a new manager, I very rarely changed anything within the first month. It was really a listening exercise, a relationship building exercise. I took the opportunity to really look at what worked and what didn't, and really get a sense of the culture. I think new managers, you know, when I think back to my own career, new managers have got a bit of a head start today because they can get a look at an engagement survey. They can take a bit of a pulse check on where things are at right now before deciding what work is required. And so I think build relationships. I think practice courageous conversations. John, you know, it's a crucial part of high performing teams. It's a crucial part of culture that we're able to have healthy friction. So I think, you know, make sure that that's something that's talked about, that we're not going to agree on everything, and that's all right. What we're not going to do is agree to disagree, because, you know, that's where we end up treading water, and you know, that, you know, we lose momentum when we do that. And you know, talk about trust, and you know, what it takes to trust each other, and you know, the two elements of trust: effective trust, cognitive trust. You know, how good of a human being are you? How predictable are your behaviors, and how well do you know your job?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, to get a vibrant workplace culture, we need good humans who can work well on their own, work well together, but also there's got to be a commitment to something that's bigger than them. And they've got to want to contribute to that.
Yeah. Okay. No, I like go in and build relationships. I like to start with that as a foundation and then build on that from there. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, because you can't without those relationships, John. And I always see that empathy is the glue that holds great cultures together. And empathy, to that ability to feel into another person is simply not possible unless you take the time to get to know someone, understand their personality, their communication preferences. But find a little bit about how they tick, and really those relationships then become the foundation for everything.
And once you building those relationships, you learn where the imposts are or where they can contribute and where they can't. You work out how the team actually fits together. So I think that's great. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Colin. Great question, John. Loved it. I might go to Danette's question now, which is, what stops managers from contributing to great workplace culture?
Two things, Jez, in my experience. Firstly, mindset. So they don't believe they can change things. They really have a sense of the status quo is this, and if I try and change it, I rock the boat. I kind of made a bit of a career, when I was as a manager myself, I made a bit of a career of challenging some of the dumb cultural norms. And there's so many dumb ones, like, endless meetings, back-to-back meetings, and emails, and copying people into emails, and processes that get in the way of progress, and things like that. So I think managers have to have the mindset that actually, culture is something that evolves all of the time. It's not static, it's perpetual. And it's only when you take positive action that it actually evolves in the right way, if that makes sense. There's got to be that consistent, we've got to aim for a vibrant culture where great work happens all of the time. So that's the first thing, mindset. The second thing is they just don't have the skills to be able to do it. And so I published a white paper last week, which really talked to those key skills that managers require. And the first one of them is just an understanding of what culture actually is. You'll be amazed, Jez. I talked to HR leaders who, people and culture leaders who don't fully understand what culture is. And so managers have got no chance, really, and we talk about things like diversity and inclusion and unconscious bias and all of these things. And these are really important, don't get me wrong, but they're this part of culture. Organizational vision, values, great. How do you use them? Vision's only as good as, as how it's used on a day-to-day basis. Values, you have to kind of actively demonstrate those on a day-to-day basis. So managers really if managers are to build culture and use it as the basis for high performance, then they need to understand it. And I don't think organizations do enough to create learning programs that teach managers not only how to build great culture, but also how to maintain it such that performance can kind of be guaranteed in the future.
Yeah, and I feel like I've definitely worked at a lot of places where they haven't, like, the managers that I've worked for maybe don't feel empowered to action change. And I think that's something that a little bit that what you were talking about there, but it is interesting.
A little bit, Jez, but I jump back to the mindset thing where, sometimes just because you don't feel empowered doesn't mean that you are. And, one of the things that Netflix talk about a lot is that they feel as an organizational culture, they will have failed if they have to remind people every day that when they walk through the door, metaphorically, that they're empowered. It's their job to actually ensure that their ideas are taken on board, that they don't discourage people from taking positive action that can enhance the way things get done.
Love that example. And I think that actually leads perfectly into my question. So I might just ask it now, which is, what does a good culture look like? And I just chose this one, obviously, because it's, it's always good to know what the good culture actually looks like for managers that might be listening to this and trying to get a good idea of it.
So at its heart, there are two elements to great culture. That's emotional intelligence and engagement. Emotional intelligence is, can people bring their best self to work every single day at its base level? Emotional intelligence definition of, is not only understanding yourself, but understanding your emotions and being able to control them whilst building relationships judiciously and empathetically. So, this concept of emotional intelligence has been downplayed in our workplaces for far too long, Jez, and yet we always know when people are being emotionally intelligent, because not only is it a friendly place to work, but there's a sense of how can we help each other? How can we elevate each other so that we achieve performance? So emotional intelligence is the first element. The second element is engagement. And engagement's become a bit of a fluffy HR word. In the work that I do, in the books that I write, what I try and do is break these terms down so that people understand what they practically mean. And engagement really is about how much do you care? How much do you care about your job? How much do you care about your teammates? How much do you care about what the organization is trying to achieve? How much do you care about the targets that you've got? How much do you care about your own development in finding your own purpose in life? Purpose isn't in a drawer next to your bed. It's something that, kind of evolves over time. And so that's what we mean by engagement. And organizations where engagement is high, so you've got a real high level of commitment, and people feel able to bring their best selves to work, and they feel that they're part of something bigger than themselves. You have that sense of belonging. They're really vibrant cultures. And, when I look at the hallmarks, for my book, Culture Fix, I kind of researched all of these great workplace cultures from around the world. And I was like, well, what are the things that they do consistently well? And there's 6 things, right? They have a purpose or a vision, a sense of aspiration, something that's short, sharp, it's, kind of easy to remember. They have a set of values, which, kind of act as emotional connections for people. Like, we hire people who believe the things that we do. And people talk all the time about hiring for culture fit. That's not what we want. We want to hire for values match, because if people believe the things that we do, then they're more likely to contribute. They spend time on understanding each other as personalities. So that relationship building piece, understanding how to communicate. They agree a set of behaviors. This is what it means to be a good human being, to do this work, to achieve this vision. They agree how they'll collaborate. This is how we'll work. This is how we won't work. This is the tools that we'll use. This is how we'll use them. And also they make time for innovation. So how do we make time to come up with new ideas? How do we capture them? How do we try them out? How do we learn from failure? And so all of these elements, and as you can see, that's quite a lot of stuff. And, if you're just promoted to a manager, that's all the stuff that you're expected to know, kind of on day one. But actually, kind of when you take the time to educate people in that way, you move from people understanding what good looks like and move to something where that they understand how to build something that delivers good every day.
Yeah, wow. Even that part alone, I'm going to have to listen back to, because there was so much good information there. But that's also from your book, Culture Hacks, which there'll be a link in this podcast description. You can go click on that and find out much more about that. What a great book. Now I'm going to throw here to Graham, because I think this is a good question. So Graham, what was your question and why did you choose it?
Thanks, Jess. So Colin, just looking at the weird sort of hybrid work environments that managers are operating within at the moment, post-COVID, although COVID's sort of still with us. I'm curious as to your thoughts on what are some of the simple sort of tactics managers can use to continue to strengthen culture when we're in this weird hybrid place where some of your team are in the office, some of your team are not, some of your team are never there, some of them might be there all of the time. So even simple things like just being able to, how we used to maintain or build human capital by connecting with others in person as it did. So just curious about your thoughts on how managers can continue to strengthen culture in this weird hybrid thing that we're in.
Yeah, it is weird, Graham, because we've never done it before. I still think there's this expectation that people they think that they can roll out Microsoft Teams, do virtual back-to-back meetings, and they think that's working hybrid, and it's not. Most people suck at hybrid working, like really badly suck at it, because they haven't taken the time to understand kind of what it is and what makes it work. I wrote, during the pandemic, I wrote the hybrid handbook to describe exactly what it looks like. And so it's no wonder that managers are struggling. Some things are still best done face to face. Virtual won't replace stuff. Also, I think the emphasis needs to be on what's best for the team, what's best for the individual. However, your question was very much about what some practical things that managers can do. Well, firstly, you can define your culture. And, the organizations that thrived during COVID when everyone was separated were the ones that actually got together and said, we need to redefine the way that we work together because it's changed, and it has changed forever. And so these are the organizations. I was literally doing back-to-back 2-day culture workshops in this basement almost daily during COVID. I was just flat out with organizations saying it's changed. We need to redefine. So if you're a manager, bring the team together. Yes, you're going to have to bring them together face to face. If you can't do that, you're going to do it virtually. You're going to talk about relationships, how you use the tools that you've got. You're going to talk about what behavior is appropriate, when to have cameras on, when to have cameras off, how to avoid talking over the top of each other when you're doing virtual work. What are you going to do to celebrate success? What are you going to do to mix socially, crucially important part of workplace culture? But all of those interactions, they make for momentum and collaboration. So there's one thing to do is actually define how you work together. The second thing that managers need to do is they need to be really great at setting expectations around outputs. So we've got a lot of people at the minute, throwing in the towel with hybrid and saying, all right, well, it's, we'll have to just bring everyone back to work full time because that's how work gets done. It doesn't need to be that way. I'm a big fan of hybrid when it's done well. So set expectations. So articulate what needs to be done to yourself before you then communicate it to the other person in their preferences so that they understand. Discuss it to make sure if they've got any objections, if they're confused about anything, or to make sure if they need any support, and then confirm it by just sending them an email just to confirm expectations for this week around what needs to be produced are. Send that off, and then you're done. And then as a manager, I can check in and say, Jez, just how are you going with this? Hey, Graham, we had the conversation on Monday. How are you going with your output? Yep. And that way you get that guaranteed output delivery by the end of the week. And then it's less about where you work and more about how you get it done.
How you work. Yeah. Nice. Thanks, Colin.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, and that's a great. I love that way to look at hybrid learning. So thanks for that, and hybrid, work and everything. So I might actually throw to Alan's question now. Alan, what was your question, and why did you choose it?
Yeah, Colin, my question comes from that idea of we've always done it this way, and people like to stay in the comfort zone. So I'm wondering, what sort of where's my questions? What causes managers to start doing things differently and actually contributing to a workplace culture?
Well, I didn't know. Good question, mate. Let me use myself as an example. Ever the egotist. Kind of what I noticed in the workplaces that I worked in was inefficiency, a lack of productivity, frustration, poor engagement. And I recognized the element, and with my team, I actually sat down and said, hey, listen, this is how we feel. There's a great quote from civil rights poet Maya Angelou, who said, people will forget what you said, people forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And culture's very much a feeling. And as a manager, I was the custodian of that culture. I didn't own it because it belongs to everyone. And so I very much saw it as my responsibility to work with the team to create something that they not only felt a sense of belonging to, but they felt a sense of pride in. I listened to a couple of the podcasts. I listened to Keith and Luther's podcast where he talked about teamwork. And all of the great teams have it. They have this sense of commitment to the team and wanting to get better. Manchester City are the best Premier League team in world football right now. And they have a great manager. You have a great coach who sees it as his job to create a great environment in which the players can hold each other to account. And so I think this is what forces managers to start doing things differently. They take a look at that and they say, well, what's the thing that I can do to really transform the way stuff gets done? And so, one of the decisions I made as a pretty young manager is we would never meet for more than 30 minutes. We would do things in either 20 minutes or 40 minutes. Right. And never an hour, I didn't want it to be driven by Outlook. I encourage people to delete emails when they went on holiday, delete the email app from their phone when they went on holiday. We used to, I set up a rule to delete all my emails when I was on holiday, so I didn't come back to emails. And it was all of these little things that we did, Alan, where for me as a leader, I very much saw it as my role to be a role model for other people, but also involve them in the business of defining the conditions that we felt we needed for success. The first job I took in New Zealand, I took our engagement score from 46% to 79% in the first year. Now, I'm not taking credit for that work. I was the catalyst for it, but it was only because I noticed where we were and the fact that we weren't doing the things that we needed to do. So I brought the team together and I fought tooth and nail for the money to be able to build culture. And I fought tooth and nail to take people off site to actually do this work. It's something that I then use as a blueprint, not only for the rest of my own management career, but also for the programs that I run today. So I think, the short answer is there's a level of frustration and also a real sense that actually, if they do things different, they can leave a legacy that will be hard to forget.
Oh, thank you very much for that, Colin.
Always.
Yeah, amazing. That's such a great way to look at it, Colin, as well. So I really came into this conversation with no real expectations. I feel like I'm learning so much. So thanks so much for that. I might end with Allegra's question, which was about how can managers pass on their good habits to maybe leaders of teams below them, or I guess people that they're a manager and then they may be running a team, and then someone else has to sort of be a manager who may not have the training. What's a great way to kind of pass on those skills?
Well, I think, kind of make what you do really, really easy to follow. I remember I got trolled on LinkedIn. That's when you know that you've got a little bit of positioning. I got trolled on LinkedIn. This guy was like, I don't know why people like this guy. All he does is spout common sense. And I did the old pray icon. That was really good, and reminder that common sense isn't common practice. And so, I think what I did as a manager and what I do in my workshops now and what in the books as well, it's just simple things that people can follow. And I think, when you're a manager, what you want to do is pass that information on. You want to say, listen, here's one thing that I tried. Here's one thing that I did. Me and my teams, we used to spend 2 hours every week just being creative. And someone was like, well, how do we make innovation a common practice? I'm like, block 2 hours out of your calendar, call it innovation time, and spend time just ideating on a problem that you've had that week. And they were like, is it that easy? I'm like, it's really that easy. So managers who are listening to this, there'll be simple stuff that they do that it's probably easy to them, but it's difficult for other people to understand. So make stuff easy to understand and then pass it on. I think that, managers who become leaders are great at coaching. What would you do? What do you think about this? What's one thing you could try? What's one bit of feedback that you received that you haven't yet acted on? Or else they're mentors and say, here's one thing that I'd done previously that might work for you. Here's an idea that I've stolen from Red Bull that I think you might be interested in. Here's one thing that Cisco did. And kind of find that balance between being easy to follow or being a great coach and a great mentor. And I think if you can bring all of those three together, you could draw a little Venn diagram, I'm sure. If you can bring all of those three things together, you'll be a positive force for good, not just for the people that report to you, but for other managers within the culture who look up to you and who are looking for a better way to do things.
Yeah, I love that that way of looking at it as well, with the two different approaches, because I know that some managers have different preferences. So I love that you've given options there. That's fantastic. Well, I might what a great conversation. I'm so happy we talked about this. But I do want to grab some final thoughts from everybody. So let's throw to Alan. Alan, what were your final thoughts on today's conversation and how managers can contribute to great workplace culture?
I guess what's coming up for me is that balance between the head and the heart. And I really love that quote, Colin, where you said empathy is the glue that holds great cultures together. So thank you.
Amazing. Yeah. And thanks, Al. Great question today as well. Graham, I'll throw to you. Any final thoughts you had on today's conversation and how managers can contribute to great workplace culture?
So many thoughts, so many notes. Brilliant conversation, Colin. Thanks so much for sharing.
Thanks, Graham.
Management's emotionally exhausting. Very true. Courageous conversations. I like the two elements to great culture. I did have one point I wanted to probably pick you up on it. And that was a comment about, or the example of Manchester City being the best Premier League football team in the world. But for others listening out there, Colin actually meant to say Richmond AFC, but he just didn't quite get it right. Thanks, Colin. It was a great chat. We could spend a week talking about culture, but this has been really informative. So thank you.
Thanks, Graham.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for that, Graham, and great question today as well. So thanks so much for that. John, I'll throw to you. Any final thoughts on today's conversation and how managers can contribute to great workplace culture?
Yeah, look, heaps. And again, thank you, Colin. I'm going to have to go back and listen to this again. The points you made about manager versus leader and the differences there, I think was really good. And for me, it was a basis to go back, and that's what I want to sort of go through. Your points out of Culture Hack, that culture, vision, and relationships are an evolutionary process. They don't just happen. They've got to, and I guess like all of this, it's got to be worked on. And if you're prepared to do the work, you'll get great things out of it. But, keep it simple. The simple things. It doesn't have to, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. That's common sense. And as you said, common sense isn't all that common. So, but yeah, just keep it simple and focus on the people.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that, John. And as well, great question. I just wanted to say that you are right. A lot of these like things that you're saying make total sense, but I just never thought of them. Like this innovation time as well, Colin, that you're talking about, where it's like, oh, how do we fix problems that we're having? Let's have time to think about it and come up with ideas. That just makes sense, but I never thought of that. So I love that. I took away a whole page of notes as well. So that's amazing. But before we head off, Colin, are there any final thoughts you have on how managers can contribute to great workplace culture or today's conversation?
My message to managers is don't throw in the towel before you've started with workplace culture. Educate yourself on the elements of great culture and what it takes. And remember that you have this opportunity to create an environment where people will be able to bring their best self to work every single day. And as long as it stays aligned to the organization's vision and its values, you won't be creating anything that will be seen as a disruptive influence. What we want is managers who have the courage to do things differently and make a positive difference to people's lives.
Amazing. Well, what a great conversation. And before we go, Colin, obviously we're going to have a link to your book in the description, but is there anywhere else that you'd like to direct people if they want to get in contact with you or find out more about this topic or just you in general?
Jez, they can go to LinkedIn. That's where I hang out a lot. They can find me, Colin D Ellis, or they can head over to the website, colindellis.com. We've just published a couple of white papers that I think people would find really interesting, and you can find them on the website.
Amazing. Well, all that's going to be in the podcast description here, so people, you can go check that out. To everybody on the call today, thank you so much for being on. Great episode. I'm like John, I'm gonna have to listen back to this one to take up all the information for sure. But to everybody listening, thank you so much for listening and subscribing. And as always, have a magical week.